Have you ever felt your chest grow heavy, your entire body collapse, so exhausted that you don't even bother to lift a hand, even though you sat still in one place all day? Your body is exhausted not because of labor, but because it is suffering cruel torture blows from your own brain. Society often romanticizes overthinking, considering it a manifestation of deep people. But MRI scans have proven a chilling truth. So, what will actually happen to the rest of your life if you don't find the off button for this brain? Let's dissect the scariest dark corner of overthinking through the following stories. Story number 1. The Centipede Syndrome. The overthinking style of paralysis by overanalysis. There was a 100-legged centipede walking in the forest. Its walk was extremely graceful and rhythmic like a dancer. A toad sitting by the road saw that, then curiously or slightly jealously stepped out to ask, "Hey, Mr. Centipede, you walk so beautifully, but I've been wondering, how can you control all 100 legs so smoothly? When walking, do you move leg number 1 first, or leg number 27, or leg number 54 first?" The centipede had never thought about this. Before, it just walked. But because of the toad's question, the centipede stopped and began to think. That's right, which leg do I move first? If I lift leg number 1, what must leg number 50 do? The more it tried to think to arrange the order for the 100 legs, the more its brain became tangled. The result? The centipede completely could not walk anymore. It tripped over its own legs and lay there pinned down, completely paralyzed. Sometimes, instinct and naturalness work much better than reason. Overthinking, excessive analysis can ruin something that was operating very smoothly. When you start to dissect every tiny detail of a problem, you will paralyze yourself. Story number 2. NASA's $1 million pen and the pencil. The overthinking style of complicating a simple problem. In the 1960s, during the space race, NASA discovered a problem. Normal ballpoint pens could not write in a zero-gravity environment. Ink would not flow down to the pen tip. Not accepting this, great American engineers spent years, costing millions of dollars to research and invent the space pen. This pen was extremely miraculous. It could write in zero gravity, write upside down, write underwater, and write at every temperature from freezing to melting. A wonderful technological achievement. At the same time, Soviet astronauts also encountered the situation where ballpoint pens could not write in space. So how did they solve it? They used a pencil. People who overthink tend to complicate everything. When facing a problem, they often go looking for giant, complex, and costly solutions in both energy and time, while the real solution lies in simple, obvious things right before their eyes. Story number 3. The Unknown Masterpiece. The overthinking style of toxic perfectionism and nitpicking details. In Paris, in the 17th century, Fraunhofer was not just a painter, he was a living legend. The most famous painters at that time also had to bow before his brush technique and understanding of light. But Fraunhofer carried within him an arrogant ambition. He did not want to paint a woman, he wanted to create life. He swore he would paint La Belle Noiseuse, the beautiful, disdainful one, the greatest masterpiece in human history, where blood actually flows under the skin and breath makes the chest heave on the canvas. He locked himself in a dilapidated studio. For 10 long years, no one was allowed to see the painting hidden behind the tattered red velvet curtain. The truth was, around the 3rd year of the creative process, the portrait was finished and it was stunningly beautiful. Any other painter would have stopped the brush, signed, and enjoyed the glory. But Fraunhofer was a great overthinker. Every morning waking up, he stared at his work and his mind began to speak. This dark patch under this collarbone is not deep enough. This look is very beautiful, but it doesn't have the flirtatious gaze of a woman in love. This skin tone is the skin tone of the realm of death. I must add a bit of peach pink so that blood and essence circulate. He began to add more color. Day after day, he divided the painting into thousands of microscopic pieces in his mind. He was obsessed with every fine hair, every pore, every minute wrinkle. When overanalyzing every small detail, he forgot the overall painting. To fix a highlight on the cheekbone, he applied a thin layer of paint. The next day, not being satisfied, he scraped it off and layered another darker layer of paint. 10 years passed with tens of thousands of times he agonized, tormented, denied himself, and applied one layer of color after another onto the poor canvas. He wanted it to be more perfect, more realistic. On a winter afternoon, two famous painters, Francois Pourbus and the young talent Nicolas Poussin, were specially permitted to enter the studio. Fraunhofer, by this time an old man, thin, with silver hair and beard, his eyes burning with the madness of someone who had just touched eternity. "You will get to admire a woman in the flesh," Fraunhofer said tremblingly, proudly pulling down the velvet curtain. "Look, she is breathing! Look at the moisture on these lips! Step back! Don't startle her!" Pourbus and Poussin held their breath and stepped forward. They opened their eyes wide. They blinked. They rubbed their eyes. They moved closer and then moved back. The air in the room thickened with astonishment. On the giant canvas, there was no woman at all. No face, no form, no lips or gaze. All the two guests saw was a wall of colors layered thick, jagged, chaotic, and hideous. It was like a swamp of crazy brushstrokes, overlapping each other meaninglessly. The painting had been killed by thousands of layers of paint from doubt, from petty corrections. But then, in a tiny corner at the very bottom of the painting, having accidentally escaped the sweep of the mad brush, Poussin saw a foot. A beautiful bare foot, vivid, soft, and so perfect that it made people want to kneel down and worship. It shone amidst the muddy pile of colors. That foot was the only remaining ruin, a heartbreaking proof showing that this painting had once been an unprecedented masterpiece, before Fraunhofer personally destroyed it with his toxic perfectionism. There is nothing on it," Poussin whispered, unable to hide his disappointment. Poussin's sentence was like a bucket of cold water slapping Fraunhofer's 10-year illusion. The madness vanished, returning to him the eyes of a normal painter. For the first time in 10 years, he stopped analyzing details and looked at the totality of his work. The truth struck brutally. He had spent a decade creating a pile of trash. He had personally strangled his most beautiful woman with his very own love and excessive desire for perfection. "I haven't made anything! I am a fool! 10 years! 10 years turned to ashes!" Fraunhofer screamed agonizingly and chased the two friends out the door. That night, the people of Paris saw a bright fire rising from the great painter's attic. Fraunhofer had burned down the entire studio, all of his works. This story, though written in the 19th century, is actually the sharpest warning for the overthinking disease of modern humans. Perfection is the enemy of the good. When a project, an article, or an idea has reached an 8 or 9 score, trying to mold it to an absolute 10 often leads to ruining the original structure. Don't let analysis destroy the whole. When you zoom in and pick at every small mistake, you will lose the overall view. Knowing the stopping point is a type of wisdom. A talented painter not only needs to know how to pick up the brush, but also must know when to put the brush down. The art of living is the same. Accepting a few imperfections is precisely the way to protect the primitive beauty of all things. The beautiful foot remaining on Fraunhofer's painting is exactly a reminder. True beauty had once existed there, before you thought too much. Story number 4. The Axe Thief. The overthinking style of inference and self-suggestion. There was a woodcutter who lost an axe. He searched everywhere but couldn't find it. Looking over at the neighbor's house, he saw the neighbor's son lingering around his house. The woodcutter began to suspect. He observed the boy, the way the boy walked, just like an axe thief. The way the boy talked sounded exactly like an axe thief. The boy's eyes were sneaky. Definitely an axe thief. In the woodcutter's head, he had drawn up an entire play about how the boy sneaked into his house to steal. The more he thought, the more he hated the boy. A few days later, the woodcutter went up the mountain to cut wood and clear out root piles. Suddenly, he found his axe. It turned out a few days ago he had forgotten it here. The next day, he returned and looked again at the neighbor's son. This time, the way the boy walked, talked, the eyes. Not even a little bit resembled an axe thief. Your thoughts will distort the lens of perceiving reality. When you overthink and carry within you a prejudice or fear, your mind will automatically collect evidence, even if very irrational, to prove that fear is real. Story number 5. The Weight of a Glass of Water. The overthinking style of brooding over sadness and trouble. A psychology professor walked onto the lecture podium. He lifted a glass of filtered water and asked the students, "How much do you think this glass of water weighs?" Students gave many answers. 100 grams, 200 grams, 500 grams. The professor smiled. The absolute mass of this glass of water is not important. Its real weight depends on how long I hold it. If I hold it for 1 minute, no problem. If I hold it for 1 hour, my arm will start to ache. If I hold it for a whole day, my arm will be paralyzed, stiff, and I will have to go to the emergency room. It is the same glass of water, but the longer I hold it, the heavier it becomes. Your anxious, upset thoughts are exactly that glass of water. Thinking about them for a few minutes is fine. But if you keep holding them in your head all day, all month, you will be mentally paralyzed and unable to do anything else. The solution is not to make the glass lighter, but to put it down. Story number 6. The Two Zen Monks and the Girl at the Stream. The overthinking style of clinging to the past. Two Zen monks, one old and one young, were on their way back to the temple. Arriving at a fast-flowing stream, they saw a beautiful young girl standing hesitantly, in silk clothes, not daring to wade across for fear of getting wet. The old Zen monk said nothing. He immediately picked the girl up, waded across the stream, and set her down on the other side. The girl bowed in thanks, and then each went their separate ways. The young Zen monk, seeing that scene, was extremely shocked. According to Buddhist precepts, men and women should not touch, let alone a practitioner. All along the way, the young monk's mind was torn. Why did elder brother do that? That is breaking the precept. Should I report to the abbot? Why did elder brother touch a woman? Just like that, annoyance and questions gnawed at the young monk all afternoon. Finally, when nearing the temple, unable to endure it any longer, the young monk spoke up reproachfully. Elder brother, we are practitioners. Why did you pick up and carry a beautiful young girl like that? The old Zen monk turned back, smiled gently, and replied, I put that girl down on the bank of the stream 2 hours ago. Why are you still carrying her until now? People who overthink often use the present to carry the burdens of the past. The matter is over, others moved on long ago, but you yourself let your mind get stuck in that moment. Story number 7. The 24 Jars of Jam Shop. The overthinking style of paralysis before the paradox of choice and fear of choosing wrong. One day at a supermarket in California, researchers set up 2 jam tasting booths. At the first booth, only 6 jars of jam were displayed. Customers passing by tasted and chose quite quickly. The atmosphere was light. People smiled, grabbed a jar, and headed to the checkout counter. At the second booth, 24 jars of jam of all colors were arranged in a long, eye-catching row. Many customers stopped. They tasted, they compared, they turned back to read labels. They asked their companions. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes passed. They put the jars of jam down and walked away. The result? The 6-type booth sold many times more than the 4-type booth. What happened? When there are too many choices, the brain begins to create scenarios. What if I choose wrong? Maybe there is a tastier type. I should try a little more. Analysis turns into paralysis. Just like in life, choosing a major, choosing a lover, choosing a job. We stand before the 24 jars of jam of life, and then cannot choose anything at all. Story number 8. The Curse of the Tightrope Walker. The overthinking style of focusing on not falling instead of walking. Carl Wallenda was an American tightrope walking legend. Throughout his decades-long career, he walked on ropes stretched across skyscrapers and deep canyons without using safety gear, and he never failed. But in 1978, at the age of 73, while performing a walk between 2 buildings in Puerto Rico, he had an accident and died. Later, his wife revealed a cruel truth. For the 3 months before that performance, Carl constantly talked about falling. He was obsessed with what if I fall? He spent his entire mind designing scenarios to avoid falling, instead of focusing on walking on the rope like before. Psychologists later called this Wallenda syndrome. Overthinking forces our brain to focus all energy on failure, what we don't want, instead of the goal, what we want to achieve. When you spend too much time thinking about risks and how not to fall, you lose the instinct necessary to keep your balance. Story number 9. The Fox and the Cat. The overthinking style of drowning in a mess of information. A fox and a cat were sitting and talking with each other in the forest. The arrogant fox bragged, I am extremely smart. I have up to 100 plans, 100 tricky ways, and countless schemes to escape the hounds. No matter what, I will survive. The cat shyly replied, I am very foolish. I only have exactly one single way to escape the hounds. Just as it finished speaking, a pack of fierce hounds barked loudly and rushed forward. Immediately, the cat used its one single way. It darted up to the highest branch and was safe. In the meantime, the fox stood on the ground and its brain began overthinking. Wait, is it better to use way number 1 or way number 75? What if I run zigzag or hide in the bushes? Or swim across the river? Because there were too many complex options in its head, the fox could not make a final decision. In just a few seconds of hesitation, the hounds caught the fox. Knowing too much is sometimes a curse. In a moment that requires urgent action, a person who has one simple solution but does it immediately will win over a smart person who has 100 solutions but just stands there considering which one is best. Story number 10, CAO, and the sounds in the night, the overthinking style of excessive suspicion and hostile hallucination. At that time, Cao Cao had just had a failed confrontation with the powerful official Dong Zhuo. From an official carrying a dream of saving the nation, he suddenly became the person most strictly targeted by the imperial court nationwide. Cao Cao's image was posted across all intersections and city gates. His safety was extremely fragile as the reward for finding him was an entire fortune and a title. Fleeing with Cao Cao was Chen Gong, a county official who, out of admiration for Cao Cao's integrity, abandoned his position to follow him. Through many days and nights of hiding, hunger, sleep deprivation, and always being in a state of a bird fearing a bent branch, Cao Cao's psychology had reached the threshold of exhaustion and defensive paranoia. Any small noise or strange look made him think that trouble was near. On the way through the Chenggao region, Cao Cao remembered that nearby was the house of Lu Boche, an old sworn brother of his father. At a dead end, Cao Cao and Chen Gong decided to knock on the door to ask for shelter. Lu Boche opened the door, recognized his nephew a man, Cao Cao's childhood name, and was overjoyed. He did not fear the deterrent orders from the court and kindly welcomed the two men into his house to hide. Seeing his nephew looking gaunt, Lu Boche said painfully, "You and the benefactor just go into the room to rest and recover your strength. My family is preparing food. But unfortunately, the house is out of good wine. Let me ride the donkey to the West Village to buy a jar of precious wine to wash away the dust for the two of you." Having said that, Lu Boche hurriedly carried the wine gourd and rushed out into the cold wind. As soon as Lu Boche was out of sight, Cao Cao and Chen Gong sat in the living room. This should have been a time to relax, but Cao Cao's brain, that of a person with a hunted psychology, began calculating. He thought, why does he have to personally go buy wine? Is the house lacking servants? And going in the middle of the night like this? Could it be that buying wine is just an excuse to go to the magistrate's office to report and claim the reward? Just as the seeds of suspicion were sprouting in his head, from the kitchen area below, a cold sound echoed up. Shh, shh. It was the sound of sharpening kitchen utensils on a stone slab. Cao Cao was startled, tiptoeing near the bamboo wall to listen. Straining his ears, he heard the servants whispering to each other, "Hold it tight, then do it, or let it lie still and then tie it up? Just tie the four legs tight and then do it, so it doesn't scream loudly." At this point, Cao Cao's overthinking chain completely lost its brakes. The conspiracy theory in his head was perfectly assembled. Lu Boche pretended to be away to go report to the officials is greater than. The family members stayed behind to prepare tools to overpower me. The words tie up and do it now were meant for Zhao Zhao and Chen Gong. Extreme panic combined with self-defense instinct blurred all reason. Cao Cao did not need verification. He turned to Chen Gong, his eyes cold and sharp. "They are about to take action. If we don't act first, we won't be able to step out of here." Without hesitating for half a second, Cao Cao rushed straight down to the kitchen to confront and stop them. The Lu family servants were busily working, and before they could understand what was happening, Cao Cao took his own safety as the priority and took blind, erroneous actions that could not be undone. The loss of control of a person dominated by a hostile hallucination created a terrible misunderstanding. The little bit of gratitude that had just been sparked instantly turned into a deeply painful tragedy, completely shattering the peace of the entire Lu family. All the noise quickly subsided, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating atmosphere. After dealing with the imaginary threat, Cao Cao panted. He and Chen Gong searched the backyard to see if there were any other traps waiting. And then, Cao Cao's footsteps froze. His hands slumped down. In the corner of the backyard, under the pale moonlight, there were no traps, no ropes, to catch people. There was only a fat pig with its 4 legs tied tight, lying and oinking next to a pot of boiling water that was bubbling. As it turned out, the Lu family was discussing how to prepare ingredients from the most precious pig in the pen to make a feast to treat the guest from afar. The words "tie up" and "do it now" that Cao Cao heard were for the preparation of the banquet, not at all for him. Chen Gong saw that scene, his limbs went weak, and he cried out to heaven, "Mengde, you were truly wrong. Your suspicion has brought calamity to the best of people." As he hurriedly left with Chen Gong, Cao Cao encountered Lu Boshe happily carrying the wine back. But the peaceful home of that kind uncle had now completely collapsed. The story of Cao Cao mistakenly harming Lu Boshe's family is not only a sad page of history, but also an extremely modern behavioral psychology lesson. Hostile hallucination. When you carry within you wounds, insecurities, or excessive defensive psychology, you will tend to see malice, even in the kindest actions of others. A joke is translated into sarcasm. A silence due to busyness is translated into hatred. Overthinking creates its own bad reality. Cao Cao was afraid of being betrayed, so he inferred and acted cruelly. The result? He lost a true benefactor, turned himself into a cold and ruthless person, and pushed Chen Gong, his companion, away from him later on. Your inference often doesn't protect you. It only pushes the people who love you away. Blindness due to losing control of the pause. Between hearing the sound of sharpening a knife and the action of drawing the sword, Cao Cao skipped a step: verification. People who often overthink usually react to negative emotions, immediately texting to argue, blocking contact, letting out hurtful words instead of pausing for a beat to ask the other person directly, "Hey, what is that pig being tied up for?" If you cannot control your inference, your mind will become a prison. There, you paint ghosts that are hunting you, and then you personally hold the knife to stab the most precious relationships in real life. Story number 11. The sound of dripping water and the Nocebo Effect. The overthinking style of exhausting oneself with imaginary troubles. A man volunteered to participate in a safe behavioral psychology experiment under the close supervision of experts. The researchers wanted to find an answer to an interesting phenomenon. Can human belief and anxiety deceive the body, creating authentic feelings of fatigue? They put the man in a quiet room, let him relax on a comfortable recliner, and gently covered his eyes. The experts explained that they were performing a test to measure the body's reaction when facing a hallucination of physical depletion. An expert used a piece of plastic, gliding it along his arm, completely just a skin contact. But simultaneously, right next to it, they had prepared a dripping system, letting each drop of water fall into an empty jar. Drip, drip, drip. In the quiet space, because he could not see anything, the man's brain began to fall into the overthinking trap. He suggested to himself that his strength was actually draining away with each of those dripping sounds. He told himself in his head, "The dripping is slowing down, meaning my strength is weakening. I feel so cold, I'm fading away." And what amazed the scientists happened. His face turned pale with anxiety. His heart rate and breathing changed exactly like someone who was overworking. A short time later, he fell into a state of extreme panic and fainted from mental exhaustion, a reaction identical to having just experienced ultimate stress. Immediately, the experts stopped the test, woke him up, and reassured him. In reality, he was completely safe and sound. That drip-drip sound was just filtered water falling into the jar. No physical impact had occurred. The man was defeated by his own anxiety and the scenario woven by his brain. This is the clearest evidence for the nocebo effect, when overthinking thoughts can create real fatigue, even though your body is inherently perfectly healthy. Story number 12. The Elephant and the Thin Rope. The overthinking style of self-limiting based on prejudices from the past. In a certain training camp, there were people specialized in caring for and taming elephants. When the elephants were very small, people would drive a sturdy wooden stake into the ground and use a rope tied to their legs to hold them back. The baby elephants constantly struggled, pulled, and thrashed with a desire to escape. They tried their best until they were exhausted. They cried out in helplessness, but the wooden stake did not budge. Day after day, they tried again. Day after day, they could not escape. Then one day, they accepted defeat and stopped trying. Years later, When those tiny elephants had become giant creatures weighing tons, carrying within them the strength to uproot an ancient tree, people still held them back with a thin rope identical to the one from the old days. And they stood still obediently. Not because they weren't strong enough, but because in their minds, that stake was forever a limit that could not be uprooted. The lock imprisoning the elephant did not lie in the rope. It lay in the memory of repeated failures. Overthinking is the same. Many of us are tying ourselves down with old experiences. A single rejection, a single stumble, a single time not being recognized. And then the brain automatically frames a conclusion. I can't do it. While in reality, the you of today has matured, become more courageous, and much stronger than the you of that day. It is time to snap the rope of the past. Story number 13. The black dot on a white piece of paper. The overthinking style of obsessed with negativity. A psychology professor walked into class, holding a white A4 piece of paper. In the exact center of the paper, he drew a very small black dot. He held the paper up and asked the class, "What do you see?" Immediately, the class replied in unison, "A black dot." The professor sighed and smiled. How strange. Why is it that all of you only see a tiny little black dot, while not one person sees the entire massive expanse of white paper surrounding it? This is how overthinking ruins your day. You have a good job, stable health, and good friends. That is the white space. But just because of one criticism from a boss at 9 a.m., or a late reply from a lover, the black dot, you use your brain to magnify that black dot until it obscures the entire paper. You let 5 bad minutes ruin the remaining 23 hours and 55 good minutes of the day. Story number 14. Buridan's donkey. The overthinking style of dying because of inability to make a decision. This is a famous philosophical paradox. There was a donkey that was extremely hungry and thirsty. People placed it at a position exactly in the middle, equidistant from a very attractive bundle of fresh grass to eat and a bucket of cool water to drink. The donkey looked at the grass and thought, "I am very hungry. I should eat first." But as soon as it intended to walk, it looked at the water bucket and thought again, "But I am also very thirsty. If I eat dry grass without drinking water, I will choke. Perhaps I should drink water first." But just as it turned toward the water bucket, it thought again, "If I drink water and my stomach is full, how can I eat the delicious grass?" Because the distance to the water bucket and the bundle of grass was exactly equal and the levels of hunger and thirst were also equal, the donkey could not find a most perfect reason to choose which one first. It stood there analyzing, weighing pros and cons, fearing it might choose wrong. Finally, the donkey collapsed from hunger and thirst right in the middle of the two sources of life. Overthinking makes us long to find the perfect choice, something that does not exist. Sometimes, an imperfect decision made immediately is better than no decision at all. Don't stand at the crossroads thinking until you die. Choose a direction and walk. Story number 15. The Pottery Class Experiment. The overthinking style of procrastinating action for the pursuit of a perfect plan. This is a real experiment recorded in the famous book Art and Fear. A pottery teacher divided the class into two groups. Group A, the quantity group. The teacher said, "I don't care what you make. At the end of the term, I will bring out a scale for grading. If you mold 50 kilograms of pottery, you get an A. 40 kilograms gets a B." Group B, the quality group, the teacher said, "You only need to submit exactly one single pottery jar, but it must be totally standard and perfect to get an A." At the end of the term, an extremely surprising result occurred. All of the most beautiful, most sophisticated, and most creative pottery jars belonged to Group A, the quantity group. Why was that? While Group A was constantly molding, failing, learning from experience, and making new ones every day, they acted. Group B sat and discussed, drew drafts, and inferred what perfection was. Fearing that doing it wrong would ruin the clay, they overthought. In the end, Group B produced nothing worthwhile except piles of dry clay and a few distorted jars molded hastily at the last minute. Overthinkers always want to draw up a perfect plan before starting, waiting for the right time, waiting for enough skills, fearing failure. But the reality is, perfection is not born from thinking. It is born from the process of doing, failing, and correcting. Stop thinking, start molding the pile of clay of your life. By this point, perhaps I don't need to explain further, then you also know what will actually happen if you let overthinking go too far, right? The rest of your life will be losing a lot. I emphasize losing very, very much.